All right, second thing we're going to look at regarding the Great Depression is the Dust Bowl. Now, this is actually the nickname. A darker color there. Right. Now, this would actually be the nickname, so we can put it in quotes. Right. This is going to be a period of time during the Great Depression where a series of severe dust storms, and you probably think some of these pictures are photoshopped, but they're not. Right. It really was a tragic period. Right, and it's kind of reflective of the hard times people faced in the Great Depression. So a series of dust storms that swept across the Great Plains that impacted millions and millions of people during this particular period. Now the years would be 1930 and 1940. So I know I told you we had a nickname, right? That's why sometimes the Great Depression is referred to as the Dirty 30s. All right, so you got to know the dates, you got to know the time period, because everything in social studies is kind of operating on a timeline, and different things affect different other things, and they just blend into one another. All right, so what causes all of these massive dust storms? Okay, well I could probably add a third one a little bit later on, but we'll look at the two. Look at these overs keep coming back. Overproduction, overspending. Right, so overgrazing. All right, it would be the first one. Grazing would be, cattle ranchers, sheep herders, things like that. Right, even if you had a horse farm. Right, the idea here. Let me see if I can get rid of that blue box there, because it's going to annoy me if I can't get rid of it. There we go. The idea, and I'm going to put my art skills on display here, is let's say that this is a brown color. I guess I'm going to have to go get some brown. Right, that is black. It's not brown, but that's okay. Right? That is the soil. And out in the Great Plains, that's really good soil for growing lots of healthy crops. Right? The thing that protects that soil is grass. So believe it or not, the purpose of grass is not to make your yard look pretty, it's to protect your soil. That root system that the grass has, right, that's what keeps the soil on the ground. So when overgrazing became an issue, basically what happened is when the cows, that's a cow, right? And that's the nose of a cow, or the mouth of a cow, right? When a cow would come through and graze too much, right, it would lop off too much of the grass. So if I just get an eraser, right, it would just can't really erase grass, but you get the idea, right? They would chop off and eat all the grass, and now they're exposing that bottom layer. And what happens then is, when the wind comes through, or the wind is blowing, it's going to pick up all that dirt and just send that dirt flying, which would be the massive dust storms, right? The other one is over farming, so too much farming. Basically, farmers don't follow tried and true methods of protecting the ground, right? Sometimes farmers use what's known as crop rotation, meaning to try and preserve nutrients for your farm, right? You would leave some of your fields empty, all right? So let's say that this was all my farmland. It's divided into 4 sections. Let's say this season, I'm going to plant crops in those 3 fields. I'm going to leave this field empty so that it can replenish the nutrients in the soil. And then next year, or next season, next planting season, right, I might plant my crops in those fields and leave this one to replenish the nutrients. So it's like every 4th year, one of those fields would be getting, a break to replenish all of its nutrients. Right? Farmers don't do that. During World War I, when they had that increased demand, they were trying to make as much money as they could. So they were using all of their farmland, and basically, all throughout the Great Plains, right, the soil is going to be exposed. So combine that, I'm going to put a third cause here, with freak weather conditions. Right, out in the Great Plains, they have severe drought and high winds. So you take all these 3 factors together, and you get these monster dust storms like you see down here in these pictures, right? And like I said, you think they're Photoshop, but they're not, right? So where are we talking about here, right? If you look at this map, you can kind of see it's a big, big chunk of the United States, all right? From the Dakotas up here in the north to Texas down here in the south. Quite simply, we can say the Dust Bowl was the entire Great Plains. Some areas are going to be hit more than others. Obviously, Oklahoma, northern Texas, that area there, the red would be the most severe dust storm damage, right? But some of the dust storms, which weird, it's a kind of a weird story, and it's kind of interesting, right? But some of the dust storms were so powerful that they blew dust right, out here towards the East Coast. And there's an old story about a senator who's standing outside the U.S. Capitol building, and he sees, like, these dark clouds coming, and he jokes around and says, there goes Oklahoma, because the dirt from Oklahoma gets lifted up into the dust storms, right? So yeah, he's kind of making light of it, but it definitely was a serious thing. Okay? And then what's the impact does it have on people? Obviously, if you're a farmer and these dust storms hit, right, your farm is going to be destroyed, right? And we're talking like, burying houses, burying cars in all this storm. Some people are going to be trapped in locations for hours on end. So we're looking at over 3 million people who have to leave. They're going to be referred to, and this is kind of where this term comes out, as migrant, right? The word migrate means to move. So they're forced to leave their homes, right? And a lot of them are going to travel west towards California. So here's the Dust Bowl, right? This map's kind of, tilted on its side. But they kind of head out west looking for opportunities for work, right? So this picture here shows you what would be known as an Okie, somebody who leaves the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. They pack all of their belongings and they just have no choice but to leave. So like I said, it is a very, it's an example of how, geography or how the land can impact our way of life, right? But it definitely is a sad thing, right? So here's a bigger map. You can see, Highway 66. Right out of the Cars movie, right? So heading west looking for work would be the idea there. All right, and then the last thing, looking kind of at Dust Bowl life, these are two famous Americans. Dorothea Lange is the first. She was a photographer. No, this is not Dorothea Lange. That's actually one of her most famous photographs, probably one of the most famous photographs in American history, and it was known as Migrant Mother. Right? She basically traveled around the Dust Bowl, right? Migrant Mother. Right, taking photographs, trying to bring this problem or the struggles that these people were facing to the American people. Remember, there's no Twitter, there's no Instagram or Snapchat or none of those things. So the only way people can experience this is through newspapers or through the radio. All right, and then John Steinbeck's another one. You may have read his book. You may not have read his book. You may end up reading it in high school. Right, who knows? But John Steinbeck, he writes a very famous novel called The Grapes of Wrath, which kind of follows the problems, the strife of these migrant workers. Okay, so Dust Bowl, huge dust storms, geography impacting people's way of life, obviously very sad, very tragic thing.